Let's go ahead and get started. Well, let me introduce myself to those who are new. I'm Mark Weathington. I'm director of the JCRA Arboretum here at NC State. And today's midweek program is something I often don't like doing, which is I always feel like it's, what I did over my summer vacation. Talking about a trip that a tour I led to Costa Rica this past winter. And normally I'm like, that's not really an Arboretum thing. I didn't do it for the Arboretum. I did it to help out a friend who runs a travel company we use regularly. So I kind of begrudgingly said I would do it, in part because I felt like Costa Rica was very touristy in terms of going to, and did I really want to do that? But he was in a bind, so I helped him out. And wow, I loved Costa Rica. It was fantastic. So I agreed to go ahead and do a talk. And it was hard to put together. I really I had a lot of plant pictures, and I pared them down to just a few groups of the plants I like. But I'll talk a little bit more about Costa Rica in general as well. So please put questions in the chat. We'll answer the ones we can going along, but then we'll answer more. I'll answer ones that from at the very end where you can unmute yourself and if you want, rather than typing it in. But we'll try and answer everybody's questions. So I always like to situate people because I find people don't look at maps like I do. If you ever visit me in my office, I've got maps on my walls. I love maps. I've always loved maps. That used to be how I picked out my fantasy books when I was a wee lad, was looking at which had the coolest maps in the front. And I always find that people don't realize where Central America and South America is. If you've heard me talking about Ecuador, which is down here below Colombia, talking about it's actually south of North Carolina. Well, same thing. Costa Rica is really south of the east coast of North Carolina. It's south of, the west edge of North Carolina, but it's the same time zone, which makes travel easy. None of that jet lag type thing. But it's kind of a interesting country. It was under Spanish rule for a while, but it was not, despite being named Rich Coast, Costa Rica. This is not where the Spanish were really doing much. They were more down here, and it was an extremely poor country. And when the Spanish kind of gave up claim to any of this lands, it was part of these countries all kind of formed an alliance, but those things didn't work out quite so well. And they eventually, in 1847, Costa Rica declared its independence. And it was just a terribly poor country. It was one of the poorest countries in Central and really South America. There was a short civil war in 1948, very, very short civil war. And after that civil war, they completely disbanded their army. 1949, disbanded the army. They're one of the few countries like that. They have no army at all. And just think they can use all that money for military for something else. It's great. So just a few facts about it now. It is the 7th freest press, according to the Press Freedom Index in the world. It is the 37th most democratic country, according to the Freedom in the World Index. And when I was there this winter, they were having elections, and boy, there were signs everywhere. And elections were quite different there. And it is the 12th happiest country in the world. So not a bad place to be, actually. And that really came about because they early on, they realized that there was a limit to the natural resources they had. And this is the country itself. Limit to the natural resources that they had. They could continue cutting down their rainforests and planting more coffee and bananas, but they're not that big a country, and all those forests would be gone. And they recognized that wasn't the way to go. But they have high mountains. Their highest peak is 12,500 feet. They've got incredible volcanoes to visit. They've got cloud forest. They've got rainforest. They've got dry forest. They've got Caribbean coast on their east side. They've got a Pacific coast on the west side with lots of great beaches. They've got an incredible diversity of plants and animals and insects and birds and plants. I may have said plants twice, but that's okay. They deserve it. And so they really, they have this great, they have a great natural resource, that being its nature. And they really decided early on that was where they were going to put a lot of their effort. They did away with their military. They were the first tropical country in the world to have stopped and reversed deforestation. And they've really focused on, as a major, I think maybe now the major part of their economy is tourism. And they take it very seriously. Their guides are very well trained. They have a great health system for their residents, but also in case something happens with tourists. They've got good roads to get to main places. You can get into areas where it's a little bit trickier. And they've also become a great place for expats. People are moving there, and it's real interesting. You can basically buy into their health system and their social security systems with a certain amount of time and a certain amount of payments. It's really pretty remarkable. Now, I've heard different stories about how it got the name Costa Rica. The one that I heard most often in Costa Rica, at least for the Americans, was that it was called the Rich Coast first by Christopher Columbus on his last trip in 1502 to the New World. There are some other stories that some other people did, but the story goes that Columbus saw indigenous people there wearing gold jewelry, and so thought that it must be just filled with gold. It's not. But it is an interesting country. So you can see this, we can see my cursor going up through the center here are mountains. So the mountains come down close to the sea. They get very high, like I said, 12,000 feet, all the way down to, and then they get, down to the coast. So it's tropical along the coasts. And then when you get into high mountains, you mostly have cloud forest, which is a really interesting habitat. Think of San Francisco as cloud forest almost. It's high enough that literally the clouds come through like fog, keep everything kind of moist, hydrated, but it doesn't get blazing hot. It doesn't get cold because they're down near the equator. And so it is the perfect place for all these tropical butterflies and birds and things like that. And interestingly, orchids. Those cloud forests are one of the main areas for orchids. Now, orchids grow in very dry areas. They grow in very wet areas, but cloud forests are where you get all of these, so many of these epiphytic orchids, and where their diversity is just insane. So really a beautiful country. We did not see it all, unfortunately. It's limited time. Come into San Jose, and we stayed right outside of San Jose at first, and then we went up this way, and then up this way, and then down along the coast with a couple stops, and then finally stopping at I can't read the map, but down around here. So didn't get down to the East Coast at all, which was sad because I've got a friend who lives down here who I'd love to visit. He's a world expert on begonias and poison dart frogs, which is why I think he moved there, was to be closer to his beloved poison dart frogs. So, like I said, it is beautiful country. Coasts, rivers, waterways, the cloud forest where it's just so lush. I mean, if you stand still for too long, there are going to be orchids and bromeliads and Araliaceae and everything growing on you if you stand too long. And it is, you can look at a log like this and every plant will be different on it. And, more traditional kind of mountain scenes really get to kind of the drier side of the mountains where it's less of cloud forest and more high tropics. And so there's just all these different things that live there. And to get around, this was a tour group, so we had a bus, but we also rode in the back of trucks a little bit, which was interesting. It was going much faster than it seems here, or at least it seemed to at the time. We traveled by boat, which was also a whole lot of fun, through some rapids and those kinds of places. I think we only had one person fall out of the boat. Traveled by horse a little bit. These horses, if you've ever ridden down into the Grand Canyon on a mule there, and the mule has better balance than you do when you're standing on the ground and moves slower. That's kind of how these horses were. They were not going too fast, but it was a whole lot of fun. And we just rode anything we could find that would take us around, even giant beetles. And you go around, you see there's so many animals. We saw these little lizards, saw a whole lot of these bigger guys, and these things are funny. The iguanas, you can be standing there and looking around, looking at the birds, looking at the plants, and then all of a sudden something moves and you look down and realize there are 30 iguanas, within 20 feet of you, and you had no idea. It's a good thing you didn't step on one of their tails. There were some bigger lizards that we saw, especially while boating, and man, these things are huge. I'm spent a lot of time in the Okeechobee Swamp down in Florida and in Louisiana in the bayou, and these things, they could eat most of those gators in one bite. There are even some bigger lizards we saw. What you don't get there is it's moving and roaring at you. There were some weird things in Costa Rica. I think it's that tourism thing that sometimes they try things that don't always work, but kind of cool place. But one of the neatest things for me as we traveled around, I want to see plants. I'm a plant guy, always have been. So I'm always wanting to, hotel, I'm always itching to leave and go somewhere else. But the hotels there are all, or at least all the ones we stayed at, like botanic gardens, and literally with signs. You see a little sign in front of this plant here, and just outside of the capital, San Jose, up at Monteverde, Punta Arenas, everywhere we went, it was just this incredible, incredible gardens there. In fact, at one of them, Rio Azul, where we stayed, that's where we rode the horses and saw the dinosaurs. They literally have a botanic garden, and our in-country guide there was talking to the owner of the place and told him what I did. And that guy got so excited, and he grabbed me and he pulled me around, and he had weird little rare orchids that were flowering. And he was so excited that somebody else appreciated it. Now, I will say the garden was awesome, but there were also hot springs and a nice open air bar. So it was a fun place to stay, and every place was its own little cottage. So everybody had their own little cottage with a nice porch and everything there. Another good thing about Costa Rica and its real turn towards tourism, the food is great there. They have really good food, good seafood. Interesting dishes, because they've had so many expats move there that there's a lot of different traditions and styles. Plus, that area of Central America had, Creole influence, Spanish influence, the indigenous influence. It's just so many different cultures have kind of come together and mixed there over the centuries, that they have really, really good food. But that Rio Azul, I have a former teacher who does tours, garden tours like I lead, and I sent him the name and pictures of this place. I was like, this is a place you got to take your groups when you come to Costa Rica. It was just spectacular. I spent the better part of a day just wandering around this entire place, taking photos. And it's, the plants. I could go on and on about the plants, but there are a few groups that I really clung to wherever we went. The Heliconias, the lobster claw plants, that were just everywhere, and they're so different from each other. They all have kind of the same basic biology, but there's some that are 3 feet tall like this, and then there's some that the leaves get 12 feet tall, and the flowers are the size of I don't know, they're bigger than a bread box, and just so many different. And I mean, I culled through my pictures just to not do too many of these things, because it's so easy to do. But you have these upright ones, like I showed that first one, Psittacorum, and this Lingulata and Latispatha, and even this Wagneriana. Although there's one that is identical to this, except it's like this Heliconia chartaceae, which it's hanging down, but same coloration. They're ones that are all just screaming red, bright oranges. And these are just the species. These aren't even hybrids. And there are hybrids. The gentleman at Rio Azul, he had been collecting a lot of these, so he had hybrids as well. And just, a real quick look into the biology of them. These are all bracts. They're not actually flowers. The flowers are these things inside, and they can be, pretty showy parts or not, as the case may be. It's these modified bracts that are really important ones. But there was one there that I had never seen before that, oh my gosh, I loved it. It was a huge heliconia. These were probably 12 feet tall, the leaves and stems, and they would come down, and this is, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet long. And it is covered in fur. I mean, this is fur. It's not hairs. It is fur. You can pet this thing. It's stiff as a board. If you cut this off, you could swing this around and brain somebody. But look at the size of that. I mean, I don't have the biggest hands, but that's a huge flower. That's just, like this piece right here. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. My daughter was with me, and she said it creeped her out. It was too much like a spider's leg, which I did not appreciate her saying. It didn't completely ruin my appreciation for this. But, I'd love to delve into these things because, you have them upright where they're going to catch all this water in this modified bract. That's got to be a part of why they do that. But then you have a whole groups of other ones that are upside down, like this. What's the purpose of that? You see so few other plants with this structure. And then one like this that is covered in dense hairs. I would think this maybe grows in a drier part of the world, of the tropics and of Costa Rica, and the hairs help it absorb moisture. Or maybe it grows where the sun is intense and the hairs are there to protect it from too much sun. I don't know, because the foliage on all of them is pretty similar except for size. Cool stuff. And then some other ginger relatives, or lookalikes. I love these hidden cone gingers. This is when it's past flowering. This is the typical Zingiber spectabile, but they're also more these yellow orangey forms. It is possibly a different species, but if so, I don't know what it is. Zingiber officinale is the ginger of commerce. So these are very closely related. There are some zingibers that we grow. Zingiber myoga we have in the garden. I know we just divided a whole bunch. So we'll have those maybe for our members giveaway or for sale. But we have a bunch of those. They're great shade plants. And the best things about most of these ginger relatives, the zingibers and the costas, the hardier ones that we can grow, which aren't really these, but the deer don't eat them because they have that gingery taste. But I love these costas, these spiral gingers. We grow here at the Arboretum, Costas speciosus, which has white flowers on top, and it's in flower right now. But this has this orange cone, and then these kind of this red cone, and then these kind of orange yellow coming out are the flowers, and it'll flower over a long period of time. But they'll stand, depending on the type. For the ones we can grow here, 3 to 4 or 5 feet. But there are some in the tropics that go 8, 10 feet tall, and almost all of them, just the stems spiral around like that. And you can see they grow in shady areas, but you can see if you spiral like that and do all your leaves on one side, every leaf gets full sun, gets as much sun as possible. So they really, if they're in dense, shady rainforest areas, they still are maximizing their sun, which is just such a cool adaptation that I very rarely see this in other plants. And I love going through and love seeing these adaptations and trying to figure out why it's there. Now this is a wild one, Calathea crotallifera. So if you know prayer plant, real popular low light indoor plant, usually has really nice marked leaves, kind of silvery or purpley on veins or both. Those are Calathea, prayer plants. These are, I think, the fruits on this one. They could be the flower kind of structured like this where the flowers pop out, but I don't know. But they were wild. Took me a while to figure out what they even were in terms of what genus. Such cool things. Another ginger, and this is one I had seen pictures of, and I've seen as a cut flower. It's called the torch lily, and it sends up these stalks straight from the ground. They've got these red bracts and this cluster of red flowers, almost like a protea. but I hadn't really seen them growing well. I'd just seen them as cut stems or pictures. And it winds up there. This is them in kind of underneath all the leaves. And the leaves are growing to 15, the leaf stalks 15 feet tall over them. And then I'd never seen the fruit before. And that fruit is, maybe the size of it's larger than a softball, we'll say that, but smaller than a volleyball. And that sucker is hard as can be. You could cut this thing off at the ground and use this to, as a club, kill that dinosaur with it. Just amazing. And to see these just growing along the side of the road, made me want to move to the tropics. And I will say, up by Rio Azul, while I was riding that horse, I saw a sign that said lots for sale. And I think it said 2 million colones. And I did some math and figured out that was about $20,000. I thought, man, I could retire to Costa Rica. My wife would want to be closer to the coast because I was up in the mountains, but I liked it up there. And I'd have dinosaurs right down the road. What more could you want? Orchids, I mentioned those. I do love orchids. Dress up like one. And orchids are such a variable genus. I label these as best I can. The ones that are unlabeled, I don't know the names of. Ones that are labeled, if you want to argue with me, I'll let you win because I don't know my tropical orchids that well. But, this is one of the one of the largest groups of plants, but it's also one of the ones that has the most floral morphology diversity out there. There are little tiny ones. This one, if you saw this stem without the flowers on it, you would think it was, a ginger lily or something like that. And then it flowers with these incredible, beautiful flowers. Most we think of orchids as, kind of this having this, symmetrical flowers this way. That's a hallmark. They pretty much all have that, but, having these petals that go up the top, but then you have something like this that only has one lower petal. And a lot of times these orchids have co-evolved with insects, and there is a very, there is maybe one insect that pollinates these things. But you would see these incredible orchids just growing in trees in the wild and plants in the wild. Some of these are taken at an orchid garden, but some are just out in the wild. These little maxillarias, they almost look like the Cymbidium goringiais that we can grow, more of the typical Vanda types like you would get at a garden center or something like that. I actually love these kind of muted ones with almost chocolatey colors. I something about that chocolatey with the pink or white, I find really, really striking. I went through an orchid phase before I had a garden. I had an apartment and I just had shelves with lights. And as soon as I bought a house with a garden, I pretty much did away with my orchid collection. Arboretum spicatum. Look at that. That's an orchid. That's an orchid. Those are orchids. Those are mostly recognizable as orchids, but if you get up and you look at an individual flower, it looks like an orchid flower. But wow, so showy. You could use that as annual bedding plant. And some of these orchids bloom at a really specific time. Some of them really just bloom all year round. Mostly in Costa Rica, it's a question of wet, dry, and dry season. So their dry season is from December or so to May, maybe, and then it's the wet season. So this is during the dry season when so many of these are flowering. The spider orchids, Brassia, I looked at this one, thought this one was cool. And then over here, look at these things. Some of these appendages, these petal tips are, over 24, 30 inches long on this thing. How is that for cool? I love these funky things. And then if you go real funky, you got these things that mimic insects, a lot of times it's these big wasps or bees, things like that. And this, I don't have a picture of the whole plant, but this you can see behind it. This is this long, narrow stalk, and it's kind of these overlapping, almost scale-like leaves that'll grow 5 or 6 feet. And as it gets taller and grows, out of between these scales will come out these little structures. This is the one it's actually growing out of. This is just another one. And these will come out of there. Wow, this part looks more like a night blooming cereus than it does an orchid, and then it flowers, and they're like, what? And the gongoras, these epiphytes, these found another adaptation or several for growing. So they're epiphytes, so they grow in trees. Now, if the flowers grow up, they're all in the leaves and everything of the plant, but also any litter that falls down, and they kind of can get covered. So what do? They grow down. So this is not the plant. The plant is up here above, and this is the flower stalk that comes down below it. You'll see these in botanic gardens, often grown in like mesh baskets, the fiber baskets. The plant will be in top, and this will be coming out of the fiber at the bottom. But then they've also adapted to look like some kind of insect. I do not want to see the insect that is helping pollinate this. And, when they look like an entire insect like this, the pollination is generally because the insect is trying to get frisky with it, as Mrs. Cunningham would say. But how can you not think plants are amazing after seeing something like this? You just, wow. And again, I love the funky things. These little things that I think are Asiantheras, I don't know for sure. They look like they're flowering right in the top, in the center of the leaf. The leaf stalk and the flower stalk are fused together all the way up, and then the flower stalk emerges from there. It does not come from the leaf stalk, but it sure does look like it. But that would prove all those plant physiologists and taxonomists and botanists wrong if we said it flowered from the leaf stem. So it can't. But you had some like this where it was a nice big one in the middle of the leaf, and this is maybe an inch across this way, inch or so this way. These are a little bit smaller, but multiples. There were some that had maybe 4 or 5 flowers in there, but all at different stages. And then if you really want weird, same exact thing, except for instead of being on the top of the leaf, it's coming out of the bottom of the leaf. So there you can see it peeking out a little bit. And these are little tiny things that are on the bottoms of the leaf. So I guess smaller insects, this protects them maybe from rain, but they're not very visible. Wow, made me want to start growing orchids again. I may or may not have some orchids now, other than hardy ones. But the one that really, we were on Monteverde, which is a cloud forest area. And, all these other orchids or most of these are epiphytic orchids. They're growing on trees. But I was walking around our hotel up the road to some natural areas, and there's this field. And from a distance, it looked like it was just full of butterfly weed. And I thought, wow, I knew there were tropical Asclepias, but not our native butterfly weed. And I get up there, and it's an orchid. It's a terrestrial orchid, although it did grow as an epiphyte as well. But it was like a weed that would pop up in areas. This area had obviously been mowed It cleared and mowed for a couple of times. Looked like maybe they were thinking about building another piece of the hotel there. And it was just all through there, growing up about 2 feet tall and all in flower. And how would you like that to be a weed coming up in your garden? Wouldn't that be nice? They call it the flame orchid, I think, Epidendrum radicans. Really, really love that plant. Another group that I didn't even try to put names on, and that nobody else on this group, and it was the group I was leading, other than a couple of our Arboretum tour stalwarts who came along. Not everybody was as into plants as I was. But the one that I tried to get people excited about and never could are these tropical blueberries. Now, there are tropical vaccinium, the actual genus of blueberries, but there are also other genera that are up there, and I just don't know them well enough. But they often have these incredibly showy flowers. This one may actually be a Gaultheria, which can also be found in really all around the world, different Gaultherias. We have one native here, Gaultheria procumbens. I have it growing in my garden. This is another one. So this is what you see from a distance. These are epiphytes now. These are like grow on trees, blueberry and blueberry relatives. So you get up close. This is the new foliage. These are the flowers that hang down. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And if you have a spot where you grow epiphytic orchids, you can grow these things, and just nobody does, except for a few gardens. But they are just beautiful plants. This is another different one that I don't know. I didn't put in a whole lot of things that just this and that, but this was one that I got really excited about. I saw these shrubs. They didn't have any of these pink flowers on here. They just had these weird structures that I thought were flowers. I was looking in there trying to find the stigmas and styles, and I couldn't. What on earth is this thing? And then I saw this plant that still had flowers on it. So this is the flower, Blakea, and it's covered in these pink flowers. I saw it really heavily flowering at another point. And then it has these burgundy red calyces and bracts around it that just last and last and last. And apparently they last almost until it starts flowering again. This is in the same family as Tibicina, princess flower that you may know, the Melastomaceae, but I'd never seen a plant that really did that was this showy without them, because I thought it was gorgeous before I even saw the pink flowers. Wild plant. I was not familiar with that genus at all. A plant that I was familiar with that we actually have growing semi-successfully here at the Arboretum is Quercus insignis. Now, Quercus insignis grows from Mexico down through Central America. I did not know it got all the way down to Costa Rica, so I was really psyched to see it. But Quercus insignis's claim to fame is it has the largest acorns of any oak. And these things are like almost baseball size acorns with the cap and everything on there. They're massive. It's an evergreen oak. You can see the new growth, like a lot of these Mexican evergreen oaks, comes out really bright red, and then it goes to kind of a dull green. They form big trees. This is a little seedling that I saw on the kind of near the roadside. We have one that we got from Mexico, and it tends to grow, and then over the winter it gets killed back to the ground and then grow up again. It did not get killed back this last winter, so it's I think it's about 6 or 8 feet tall now in Plantsman's Woods. So excited about that. Maybe if we have another mild winter, we'll get it big enough that it won't the whole trunk won't die back and we can keep it going bigger. But if we get a really cold winter, I think it will kill it outright, even if we have another 3 or 4 mild ones. But it was so cool to see that. And there were big ones, but they're hard to photograph, so I didn't have a good photograph of them. Didn't see any of the acorns because I would have really liked to get a couple of pictures of those huge acorns. Growing right near this, which I don't have a picture of, there's a clethra that grows there. And, we have native clethras. There are clethras in Asia, but they also Mexico down through South America. And some of the Mexican and Central South American ones are trees with big, 2-foot diameter trunks compared to our, nice flowering shrubs. So it's just a different world. And if anybody is on here and wants to correct names that I have on birds, please feel free. You can put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and let me know. I did the best I could on names, but I am not a bird person. So, but let me tell you, all the bird watchers were pretty darn excited by what we saw, especially by this guy, the resplendent quetzal. And you can just barely see that long tail. He's much more green on the back, and just all the colors. The birds were not always so responsive to our desires for them to come down closer to us. Next time I go back, I am going to bring my good camera with a telephoto lens. Literally all my photos are from this trip or through an iPhone. And in some cases through an iPhone, and you see kind of the edge here and how this does weird things around the edges right here. An iPhone taking a picture through a sighting scope. And that was one of the great things. These guides, these naturalist guides in Costa Rica are so good at spotting these things. And then they always carry a bird spotting scope and will get it set up and find the very best angle for you to see these birds. So everybody gets a chance. Everybody can get a chance of really seeing the birds and the animals up close in great detail. They'll even take the pictures for you because I couldn't do that very well. They're fantastic. Everybody else was excited about those other ones and excited about this woodpecker, which I don't know which one it is, but I love that he looks like he's looking out of his place at us with, get off my lawn. But the toucans, they're a dime a dozen down there, but it does not matter how many toucans I see, or I'm like, that's a toucan. Those actually exist. That's a real thing. They're not just on boxes of cereal. Every time I see one of these things flying around in the wild, they're like puppets to me. I'm like, they're not real. They cannot be real. Why on earth would anything look like that? I love them so much. They are the best. And I can identify them. If anything was small and mostly brownish, if people would ask me, because they always do, I would say first, well, I really know plants, not birds, but looks like it's in the wren family. I learned that from our groups, that you can say it looks like it's in the wren family, and even when you have no idea, people believe you. Now, I could not get good pictures of this, and I wish I had. This is a whole colony. There was a whole mountainside up behind here filled with squawking scarlet macaws. And we pulled over and got out of our bus, and they did like Navy flybys of us over and over again. A group would come out of the trees, 3 to sometimes as many as 12, and they'd circle around, and then they would fly right over us. It was one of the times where I was way too much in awe to actually get pictures. And it wasn't until after the 4th or 5th time and they were kind of stopping, doing their flybys, I was like, oh yeah, I should try and take a picture. I wish I'd taken a video of them flying by. That was an experience, to be sure. And those things are big. They're real big. Monkeys, There are 4 monkey species in Costa Rica. On this trip, the places we went, we saw all 4 of them, which is apparently not that usual. Usually you don't see all 4. There's some that are tough to see. There's the Central American squirrel monkey, the Panamanian white-faced capuchin, the mantled howler, and Jeffrey's spider monkey. And I can't remember which one this one is. I think it's the spider monkey. Oh, yeah, this is actually video. Let's see if it'll play. These are little guys. And they'd hang out by the kitchen back door, and the guys in the kitchen would feed them stuff like grapes. That one was eating a grape that he had been fed. The howlers, we stopped and saw a couple of trees, and they were just screaming at each other back and forth, the howler monkeys. The capuchins are the ones you have to watch out for. This place we stayed, this was at the coast. So over this balcony and looking out, you can see the Pacific Ocean. This is breakfast. They would come by. When most everybody was at breakfast, they would go through, and I was in my room when it happened one time, and just there would be a couple of them. And one would go up to the balcony and pull on the doors to see if they were unlocked. And the other one would go past them to the next balcony and pull on the doors. And then the one pulling on the first one would go, and they just hopscotch along and pull on everybody's doors to see if they were unlocked. And every morning they did that. And then they'd come down by the food and, try and steal it off your plate if they could, wait for people to give them some. These were well-fed monkeys. The little guys were a little cuter. These guys, they'll take your wallet and everything in your room and leave you a little gift in the corner or on your bed if you're not careful. But cool things. Yeah, this is a video, which I don't know remember what this is. Oh yeah, across the roads, they would have these ropes so they could get across. And see, there's a little baby on his shoulders. And if you heard that, you heard one little voice on there say, "Look at the little baby there, Marilyn." That's one of our regular travelers talking to one of our other regular travelers who might be on this call. So it's always fun when I hear that. There were cotamundis, at Monteverde, at one of our at our hotels. They had different buildings all on a slope and perfectly situated to watch the most beautiful sunsets in the world. And every evening, just before sunset, a lot of people, us included, our group went out there. I got some bottles of wine and beer and cheeses, and we all kind of would gather out there and watch the sunset. And these cotamundis, think of them like tropical raccoons. They would come trooping along to see if they could get some food, and they'd go around by all the different people who were out to watch the sunsets because they knew food would be out there, and they'd tromp along. And I thought they were pretty cool. They were pretty cute. And little things like this is some little cross between a chipmunk and a squirrel. I don't know what it is, but it was being pointed out to me for about 5 minutes before I could actually see it. We saw on this trip both sloths, the 3-toed and the 2-toed sloth. This is the best view of it that I have. I don't remember if this is the 3 or the 2-toed one. The other one that we saw looked to me about like this does. It was that clear, but this is one of them. He's hanging out. And I got to impress our guide, our naturalist, who knew all about these things, who could spot these little balls of yarn 100 feet up. I taught him something new when I taught him that the old ground sloths, the prehistoric megafauna like mammoths, the giant sloths that were massive, and the mastodons and things like that, they're the reason we have things like avocados and Osage oranges, because that great big fruit with a great big seed, these giant, prehistoric mammals could eat those things. So that's why they had them. He did not know that, so he was genuinely pleased to learn it. New sloth fact. Little land crabs, these were in all over the place. Once you noticed them, you would see whole colonies of these little guys right at their holes. And apparently once the rainy season starts, say June, July, August, these things come out for like a couple of days, and there's just thousands and thousands and thousands of them. They have big, party spring break, make bad decisions, and then go back down into their little burrows and have more crabs to party next year. These are little guys, just a couple inches across, with kind of a bluish back and then those red legs. Gladiator tree frog, a little flat little white guy. So many cool things there. And they're out there. It's not, these things aren't hidden. You see them when you go there. It's just so rich and diverse. You can't help but see them. So I love this. This was somewhere you don't need to die to see paradise. I think Costa Rica should adopt that as their national motto, because it's funny to me. Better than Virginia's for lovers. But, down the river from where we were boating in inflatable rafts, we looked under a bridge where all these gators were. You may see the little green snake here, apparently very poisonous snake that wasn't too far away. And I may have mentioned how much that I don't like spiders when talking about that Heliconia, but I especially don't like big hairy spiders. And that is a tarantula that we got to get down on our knees and peer as close as we could through a little hole on a bank to see that guy in there. And after I did that, I thought, why on earth would I do that? I do not want to see a tarantula in the wild, especially when I'm walking through where it lives and presumably other ones. But our guide says they can't hurt you, but I don't believe him. But even in the oceans, you can't help but see some great wildlife. This is over on the Pacific Ocean side. I don't want to get anybody sick, but here's the secret. If you're getting seasick, look at the horizon and take deep breaths. But there's one shot I want you, before it's all over, that I want you to see. Only get them slapping their tails once or twice, but have a few of them breathing all coming up at the same time. So cool. Almost make me forget about plants. But, it isn't all hiking in danger. You're in the tropics. You got to have a little bit of time to relax. Here's at Rio Azul. And then this is our table for, this was prime property. This is the table you had to get to watch the sunset if you wanted a good place to put out all your cheeses and wines. Otherwise, you had to pull a suitcase out of somebody's room to put everything on. And of course, there's always the culture. The best guides that in any of these tours we do tell you all about the country, about the history, but about the present, and take you to see like traditional crafts like these painted ox carts used in weddings and things. And this is solid wood. This isn't inlaid or anything. That the woodworking in some of the areas they did was mind-blowing. Just awesome stuff. And I love this. It's a very Catholic country, so you don't have individual hammocks and dual hammocks. They're only individual and matrimonial hammocks, because no two other people should be in the same hammock together, I guess. So there's that sunset. It's a gorgeous place. And part of the reason I wanted to talk about it is to share the news. Don't have the details yet, but be on the lookout. This is going to be our next Arboretum trip. this winter, probably mid January into early February or so. A week and a half to close to 2 weeks. We're going to go to Costa Rica, do some of the same things that I did on this tour, do some different ones, different things. But it was something that it was so amazing. I thought, I've got to share this with my friends at the Arboretum. I made friends with all the people who were traveling with us, but I really want to share it with our Arboretum folks. So hoping that maybe you'll be able to join me. Space is always at a premium, but would love to have y'all. So there's a question, how do we find out about the next trip? So for a while, we have been advertising first to people who had traveled with us, but we've realized, who had traveled with us previously, but we've realized that as much as we love everybody who's traveled with us, it hasn't really given an opportunity for new people to come along with us. So we will, when we have all the details set, we will send a notice out to all of our members. It's open to members first. If we don't fill it, we'll do non-members, but I'm pretty sure the trip would be filled with members. So that will be how to find out about it, is be a member and be on the lookout for it. And you know, the subject line will be something like travel with the JCRA or something like that. It was a question we get a lot, is how physically demanding are the tours? The tours have different physical requirements for, you know, depending on what we do. Costa Rica trip, you should be able to manage stairs and slopes without a problem. That's one thing. We had one person on this trip who was physically fit enough to do things, but he really had trouble with stairs. So that's one thing. We are in the wild on trails. There are not the same kind of, you know, ADA rules in other countries as there are here. So that's something you need to know. And for this trip, I would say you should be able to walk 2 miles on a sunny, warm day without a problem. If you can't do that, you're probably going to struggle on a trip like this. And we don't want to have trips that keep people out from doing it, but it's just, you know, this is a trip where we're going into natural areas more than doing anything else. So if you can't do that, I would say you might think about waiting for another trip. Any questions about or corrections about any of those birds or anything else? You're welcome to unmute yourself and talk. Wow.
I just returned from Costa Rica.
Yeah.
It was a 2-hour time difference during the summer anyway.
Oh, during the summer. Yeah, and you're right. There's a 1 hour. It would be on it's on
and it was the same.
A central time. Thank you. And yeah, they don't do daylight saving. So yeah, that would be a 2-hour trip. Now, if you just got back, were you there in the rainy season?
Yes.
How was that?
It rained every day but one, but it was not all day. It was like in the morning or in the afternoon for a little while. And we were actually in Cartago, which is sort of in the mountains. Yeah. And it was chilly. Well, it was like low 70s, 60s at night. It was cooler. One warm day.
Yeah, a lot of the places we stayed in the mountains during the dry season, even, we did not have any kind of air conditioning, heat or cooling up there. I know, and some of the places we stayed were, you know, had open, like the eaves would be open to the outside. And I know there were people on the trip, again, maybe somebody who's on this call right now who was in need of some extra blankets for the room because they got chilly at night as well. And if you were out in the sun and walking during the dry season, it could get
warmer.
It got warmer than I thought, but I think that's, I don't think the temperature was that high. I think it was just, the difference in the sun intensity and then, the humidity.
And 3 years ago, we did a little bit of touring around and went to some of the cloud forest, and sounds like some of the areas you were in, and the plants are amazing, as well as the animals and birds.
Yeah, I had a whole group of pictures of ferns and palms and cycads and epiphytes, and realized I didn't want to go that long. In fact, I thought I was going to be about 30 minutes with this. Arlene is somewhere laughing because that's what I say every time. But yeah, it was a great experience.
Mark, this is Sally.
Yeah, Sally.
Hi. Did you get to go to Avenal?
To say that again?
Avenal? It's a volcano area.
Arenal?
We did.
Arenal, yes. I'm sorry, not Avenal. Arenal.
Arenal. We did not. No.
Okay. Next time, I hope you go to Tortuguero.
Yeah, that was on our list to consider going to, and that's an area. Yeah, with the next trip, I'd like to do that.
Oh, good.
You love it.
Maybe we can go.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it would. Thank you. It was very, very nice.
Thanks for sharing.
Good memories.
Yes. Oh, somebody asked if mosquitoes were a problem. We brought spray and everything. I never used any spray. I had no need to. I think there were some other people who maybe did. One thing that helps with mosquitoes is use unscented soap and shampoo. It'll get you just as clean. But
Raymond, is that you? Good. I didn't want.
Yeah. And there you go. The surfing's good. Somebody, Pamela said that. So, hey, maybe we'll go surfing as well. Arlene, you up for surfing?
Count me in.
All right. Arlene's up for anything. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It was a joy to see so many names again. It's been a little while. I know all the birders, serious birders, have probably already been to Costa Rica because I don't know that you can be a serious birder and not go there.
Yes.
If we go, I make no promises about sloths or quetzals, but you will see at least some monkeys, even if you don't see all four of them. So hopefully that'll be sent out before too terribly long.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. See y'all next week.